Well, hello, hello. It's DNN Dave, and I am excited to be here. Man, it's tonight. It's actually a late night, so streaming to you live tonight. And I have a special guest with us today. And man, oh gosh, I can't say how stoked I am about what's going on here and all that we'll talk about. Let me introduce to you all that may not know him. This is Mitchell Sellers. Hey, Mitchell, thanks for joining, man.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So we've got a pretty incredible topic tonight to just chat a little bit about the upcoming release of DNN 9.8.0. I mean, we don't usually get too excited about minor releases, but this is a pretty special one, yeah?
100%.
Yeah, so I can't wait to dig into it, but I want to tell people a little bit about you and give them a chance to read our wonderful title of this live stream. I mean, it's a little bit tongue in cheek, but there's so many truths hidden in there, and we wanted to call it what it is, right?
And bonus points for those that get the inside joke as well.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Let me switch over to screens. I'm going to introduce you here, and I have got the wrong screen on here, so I'm going to flip back over there. I'm glad, this welcome to live streaming here. But Mitchell Sellers, you can find him at mitchellsellers.com, and this is his, mainly his blog site and focusing on his speaking and his consulting business. Mitch is also the owner and operator of Iowa Computer Gurus. You can check them out at iowacomputergurus.com. And Mitch is also the technology leader of the DNN Platform project, which is an open source project out on GitHub. And it is for, I guess we say it's really the largest .NET based framework on content management system framework out there right now. So Mitch is the technology lead for that and heads up that and does a fantastic job there. You can check out dnncommunity.org and see all the wonderful things that's going on in the community out there. I mean, this community's been in existence for quite some time. Since maybe 2002-ish. And so exciting times. We're heading into an incredible release of 9.8.0. We're under release candidate right now. And Mitch, let's just chat a little bit about this and, kind of what highlights you have in here. I noticed that in the release notes here, right from the beginning, we're coming out of the gate, and there's some interesting information in here about Telerik. Can you give the viewers a bit of insight on Telerik, a bit of the history of it as it relates to DNN, as well as what is happening in 9.8.0 that is so special?
Yeah, so way back in the day, I've had a little bit of trouble figuring out exactly when, but a partnership had been created with the DNN Corporation, the former maintainers of the project, and they had worked with Telerik to obtain a special use license that would allow the commercial Telerik product to be used by the open source project, so long as anyone that was utilizing Telerik without a license was utilizing it through wrappers that were built in DNN. So basically, DNN made put all of the stuff inside of a box, and then you could use Telerik, but you were using DNN controls. It was a great idea at the time. It was something that allowed for things to move forward pretty quickly. This was in the 5X days, and maybe 4X. I'm still a little bit unclear on exactly when that came in. But it was a really good thing for the community at the time. However, one thing led to another. In 2013, at some point, that relationship between DNN Corp and Telerik had started to disintegrate and was no longer continued. So what that meant for the community at that point in time was that we had a really strong dependency on Telerik, but we no longer had a valid license. We no longer had support from Telerik, and we were stuck with the 2013 quarter one version of Telerik. And that was the last update that we got from Telerik. That was 2013.
So, quick question for those that may not know. You spoke about a kind of a wrapper or something, here. So, am I right in assuming that there was some type of mechanism around the Telerik controls that allowed, first of all, the platform itself to consume and use Telerik controls, but also third-party developers maybe for DNN?
Yes, there was. And those were all wrappers with a similar name, but they were prefixed with DNN. So Telerik had controls called rad grid, rad input, those kinds of things. And we basically had DNN grid, DNN input, a one-to-one mapping of what was in Telerik at the time, is what we had. And it was used everywhere. It was used in admin features of DNN. It was encouraged to be used by the open source modules. Some of the open source modules still are utilizing those dependencies. Third-party module vendors at times were utilizing them. So it was something that was a really good deal, but there being no long-term protections on the deal really left the community, right, with a really large technical debt. Now, most importantly, for everyone that doesn't know the storied history of, DNN Corp's role, the community's role, and the maintainer process, all of this occurred before the open source management of this was done by unpaid maintainers, by those of us that are volunteering our time, like I do, like you do, David, as well as almost every other person that commits to the releases that we have today. This was a decision that happened well before we were in control. And moving forward from that, so 2013 happened. We can no longer upgrade Telerik. The platform has continued to evolve. The dependencies within the platform on Telerik have slowly but surely been eroded over time, right? And this is no longer using it. This is no longer using it. When 9x got released and the persona bar was included as part of DNN Platform, the largest chunk of internal dependencies were removed. The 9.2 release, which was the last major release before the open source community, myself, David, and everyone else, took over maintaining the project, that release actually took those Telerik controls that were inside of the core DNN assemblies and moved them to another location. And that ended up being a really big breaking change. That's why all of the individuals were having upgrade issues getting to 9.2, because things were moved from .NET-Nuke.web to .NET-Nuke.web.deprecated for those of us with programming knowledge. For those of you without programming knowledge, it's when you upgraded and then everything broke and your site didn't work anymore. And you had to wait for your module vendors to correct it. Now, at that time, had I been the person in charge of releases, the release notes would have stated, only in the case of an emergency, move to this other assembly. The real right solution at 9.2 was to no longer use Telerik, because even at 9.2, we were 5.5 years beyond a supported DLL. So fast forwarding from there, right, we have internal dependencies that were still there. The file manager was the biggest one. We had a couple other stragglers, not a huge deal. But Telerik, during this time, really between the 9.2 release and now, has become a pretty large target for hackers and malicious individuals. So you'll notice that we have had in the past a one and only hotfix backported security patch that was done all the way back to DNN 7.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that, because that was kind of touted as the fixer of the Telerik things, and I'm sure it had some good wrapped in there, but it seems it wasn't all the way, right?
Disclaimer for those that are watching. First of all, we normally do not talk about security incidents in the capacity that we are with this one. The only reason that I'm willing and the rest of us are willing to be talking about these types of issues in such detail publicly is the fact that anyone can Google and figure out what vulnerabilities exist for Telerik version 2013. It's all public knowledge. We're not hiding anything. So it's important to understand that. So with that being said, the reality is that hotfix was created by DNN Corp and did nothing. Unfortunately, it was patching one portion of the vulnerability, but the part of that patch only worked if you had a 2014 DLL or newer. So one part of that patch actually did nothing. There is a second part of the patch that worked. And so what we did at that point is, like, think of it as we had, 5 different pathways that a malicious user could get in. That patch maybe closed one. Time went on, malicious users found other pathways in. So more common exploit and vulnerability notices, or CVEs, were released regarding Telerik, specifically the 2013. Oh, you can exploit it this way. Oh, you can exploit it this way. So we've been evaluating with the last couple of releases ways to ratchet down and essentially cripple or disable functionality of Telerik. So I included changes in 9.6, 9.5, and I think a couple in 9.4 that basically have systematically crippled Telerik. Most individuals didn't know it. It wasn't really a breaking change because we weren't using them. Some third-party modules may have broken from it. But basically what we did is, if there was a published way from Telerik to plug a leak, we plugged the leak. And so that's what we've been doing to help mitigate. A while back, we've published recommendations using Cloudflare, for example, as a web application firewall in front of your installation is a great security workaround for right now. And as a real stopgap for all of this, I reached out to Telerik about 2 years ago and said, hey, I'm the technology leader now of DNN. We have a problem. Sites are getting hacked. We can't get rid of it. Can we get, even if it's a temporary license, can we get a temporary license that gets us up to a version that we can apply all of the mitigations? Because there are published mitigations that would only require us to get up to a certain level. And they're like, well, maybe, but nobody has the source code for the wrappers.
And so we go back to this wrappers thing, right? Because we probably can't stress this enough. That this whole problem was because we were kind of locked into this 2013 version. We could not do anything about it. And, so this is not by any means a Telerik bash session or anything like that. We're talking about the perspective of Telerik in its use of DNN within DNN. So,
and the relationship that existed, right? The relationship that was shepherded by DNN software kind of accelerated some of that, and that license agreement, dissolving really is where that problem came in. And one of the questions we get all the time, well, can I just buy a license for the latest and greatest Telerik and upgrade it? Yeah. I would love to say that you could do that, but it can't work that way.
Right.
And that's because of those wrappers. There's breaking changes, and then the wrapper code that we have, the wrapper code that we don't have, and the custom DLL all comes together. So all of that being said, right, it's a storied past. It's been something looming over our head. With the release of 9.8.0, we have removed the last of the internal dependencies on Telerik, and in the release notes for 9.8.0, we are including a set of steps that are possible to remove Telerik from the platform entirely, assuming you have no third-party modules that have an issue. Now, this is a really unique thing as well, where I can't publish a security bulletin that says upgrade to 9.8.0 and life is good. Following our own processes and respecting the pain that was experienced by the community with 9.2, I can't, and the rest of us from a leadership perspective cannot release 9.8.0 with we're yanking Telerik, because we would break a large number of sites that still have dependencies. So what we've done as a workaround is we've removed it from the platform. We've made it safe from a platform perspective, and we've provided guidance for those that can to remove Telerik. My recommendation to anyone, uninstall Telerik if you can. We will be doing it for every client site possible as soon as the clients allow. And I really recommend that everybody do the same.
Well, I know it took a long time to really kind of talk about this. This is really the big news. I mean, it is. There's a lot of other cool stuff in this release, which we'll touch on briefly. But it was really that replacement of the digital asset manager, providing an alternative to that in the new resource manager that allowed us to provide these instructions for really removing Telerik as an optional on this. And is my understanding correct that in version 10, the plan is to make it mandatory removal? In other words, it'll be a forced removal of Telerik at that point, right?
It is correct. So version 10 will have forced removal of Telerik. There's a number of other breaking changes that are there. And, one thing that I think from a community perspective that's worth knowing is, why did it take us so long to get here? And, this is a great time, I think, to remind everybody, right, that we're all volunteers. None of us that are working on this project are compensated. And I know David, you, Daniel Veladas, a couple of the others, Peter Donker, and a few more, were the real contributors into the file manager. We did get some starting code from Corp to a certain extent. But this one feature alone, the file manager, we probably consumed, at my best guess, is somewhere between 500 to 700 hours of development time total, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. And if we really look at that from a volunteer perspective, even figuring conservatively, it's a $65,000, $70,000 contribution should that have been compensated. And the thing to look at is, these people, we've all been working on it there. And that's why it takes a little bit more time sometimes for us to take on these big projects, is when it's something that large, it's all volunteer.
So Mitch, what would you say your biggest recommendation would be to, let's say I'm a company out there that leverages .NET Nuke or DNN to build client websites, or I'm a large organization that I use, or a small organization that uses DNN. What would you say is something that they can do to help in these type of efforts beyond just the normal, hey, reporting a bug or an issue or something like that? I mean, you touched a bit on the contributions and stuff like that. How can they contribute back if they're not a developer or a designer or something?
The contributions can be almost anything, right? It's getting involved in the project, testing out the releases, test the release candidate, report bugs in the release candidate, fix bugs if you have the technical aptitude, sponsor one of the people that, 1, 2, 10 of the people that are out there helping maintain the project, right? GitHub sponsors is one way. Most of the individuals that are out there, they're on GitHub sponsors. It's a way to give back to somebody that has been working on a project that you love. And this isn't just for DNN. This is for anything open source. I actually blogged about this topic earlier this week. The other thing you can do is, if you've got a feature, you've got a function that you really want to see move forward that's in our backlog, go to one of the maintainers, go to one of the regular contributors, one of the people that work with the platform, sponsor that enhancement. We don't have the mechanism, and we don't have a real desire to facilitate that in a central basis, but go out, sponsor one of the developers, have them work on a feature. That's actually how one of the big milestone features that was included in 9.6.0 happened, is one of my clients sponsored the feature, paid for me to build it, implement it in DNN Platform so that they could use it as well as the greater community. And so it's definitely something that you can utilized to, try to help, those that are contributing to move things forward. But really, anything, whether it be financial or time contributions on your side, it's greatly appreciated.
Yeah. One thing that I forgot to mention, Mitch, and I do want to highlight it while we're here before we move on to just highlighting a few of the other cool things that are coming in this release. I wanted to touch a bit on a tool that you released to help those that do want to remove Telerik when they upgrade to 9.8.0. Tell them a little bit about this tool. It looks like you've created something that's free and open source for them to download and use.
Yes, definitely. So one of the biggest things that we get asked, I get it through the security alias a lot, and otherwise, is do I use Telerik, right? And a lot of people don't know. It's hard to know with 100% certainty that you're using Telerik, right? Because you can have a module that you're not using. But what I did is I built this module with just the glorious name of DNN Telerik Identifier. But basically, you install the module, drop it on a page as a super user, and it will go through and look at all of the .NET code that's deployed on your site, and it will look for any references to Telerik from a module that's installed in your site. It's going to simply tell you, the name of the extension, the name of the DLL or the actual code file, which thankfully most of the time that's there. I'm looking at some ways to be able to potentially reliably give you a little bit more information. But the idea here is if you run it and you get the nice green message, like what's shown here in the initial screenshot, you have a reasonable level of expectation that you're not utilizing Telerik in any of your component things.
That's great. Well, thanks to you and your company for putting that out there in the wild for people to use and make their transition to removing Telerik a lot easier. So really appreciate that. Kudos to you. So let's quickly go into just a few. These are not in any order out here on the release notes, but a few that we may want to highlight here just a bit. What jumps out at you, Mitch, here? To things that, we're looking at the bug fixes now, so there were quite a few of these. I think, we should probably take a moment just to say, we had 59, I believe it was, contributions coming into this release. I think I saw it somewhere up here. Let's see.
A little further up, yeah.
Yeah, 59 pull requests by 14 contributors. That's pretty amazing. It's good to see the growth there. But what jumps out at you that you would like to point out here?
So, we are at a stage with the 9X releases, right, where we're continually improving interactions, fixing some behaviors, documenting some behaviors, and cleaning those up. So a lot of the bug fixes that are in there are there. There is a couple privacy things that have gone away here as well, as one of the more notable. It's partially listed under bug fixes, and I think it's listed in other places. But the checkbox that used to exist when you would do an install that said participate in the experience program, that was something that a lot of people asked, like, what does it do? Where does it send data? It was sending data to a location that we didn't really have access to as an open source project and wasn't really doing anything valuable. So that was all removed in this release as well. Just cleaned up a few things, got rid of a few settings. But really what we're trying to show here more than anything with the bug fixes is we're doing everything we can to polish what we have and to identify and resolve those issues. And I think we really accomplished a lot with this release in that regard.
Absolutely. So of course we see a few that now I got to point out one that was just annoying the crap out of me. When you go to install the modules and the stupid accept license thing would jump when you check it. I'm like, yeah. So I'm excited about that one.
I'm just going to tell you though, in my time testing things, I think something's broken when it doesn't move on me anymore. I'm so used to, I clicked it, it moved. Now I can hit the accept button.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit weirded out. You get trained.
You're not the only person that has said that. That's really funny that you mentioned that. So let's see. We've got the file manager stuff in here, of course, in the new features area. A few other things. I think. Oh, one thing that I guess we could point out is actually one of the little geeky things that's happened is basically every Persona Bar extension that uses the old Code Mirror editor has now been swapped out with. You want to tell us?
The Monaco editor, which for those of you that aren't aware, is the same editor used inside of VS Code,
Heck
which
yeah.
is fantastic. There's one other thing in here in the new releases to keep it on the less technical and the more SEO side. In the new features area, we have added support now to be able to edit the robots.txt file as
Oh
well.
yeah, and that's with this. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
That is something that Will Stroll did, and it's really nice for those that wanted to edit this, because before you really needed FTP access to the site to be able to do it. Now you can do it from within the config manager. It's just another item that shows up in the dropdown. So that's something for those from an SEO perspective, I think is a really good thing.
That is a very good contribution. Thank you, His Mightiness. I mean, Will Stroll. Appreciate that. What else pops out here? Let's see.
The other big thing is for developers. We're continuing to add better support for dependency injection for the developers out there. We also have added support for async C# code. This is one, Brian Dukes is the one that actually submitted the pull request. But this is probably one of the best examples of the DNN community utilizing our contacts and the people that we have here to get something done and done right. So those of you that may have remembered in a prior release, we had attempted to enable this feature before. And for our multilingual folks, right, that are doing things in non-US languages, it broke everything. So we had to pull it back out during a release candidate. I reached out through my MVP channels into Microsoft, and we ended up getting up to a bunch of senior execs and program leads that led us to a developer that actually implemented the feature that caused problems in .NET Framework, and they sent us back, do this. I took that, sent it to Brian Dukes, and he implemented it for us. So
That's fantastic.
we actually got a great communication cycle from Microsoft to help us actually resolve an issue that's going to then introduce some new technology for us. So it's just kind of nice to know from our community, and for those that aren't developers, that we have windows into Microsoft, we have windows into other places to help keep the project moving forward.
Fantastic. Yeah, there's so much stuff to unpack here, but I think we've probably hit some of the bigger ones. I mean, I think you wanted to mention something about dependency injection as well, and some of the increased support there. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so the two biggest things from a developer perspective is 10x is going to be a release where we remove a lot of the old junk, right? We do have to remember that we're working with APIs, right, that have been around for almost 20 years. And sometimes things change, but historically, they were just marked as old and never removed, and they call the new implementation and it got cluttered. We've been adding support for new development methodologies such as dependency injection to allow people to write better quality code that more matches modern standards with everything. We also are expanding and doing some extension point enhancements as well, letting people take control of things. So one of the big things in that regard that came in, that's going to be a seamless change for folks in 9.8.0, is that the outbound email process is now an extension point. So right now it was moved to an extension point and is going to function the exact same way. In a later release, we're going to switch over to MailKit, which is going to improve, as an optional thing, will improve integration with like Office 365 for sending mail, but it now gives developers a chance to do something entirely different. We're looking at, for example, building a SendGrid outbound email that is no longer dependent upon SMTP at all, which is going to make email delivery reliable with verified outbound messages.
That's pretty cool. So it'll be API level to where,
yep. API level, don't have some of the volume things, can get better reporting. So there's some stuff that can be done there. And really, we're looking to continue to modernize our APIs and roll us forward. There's been a lot of talk about what's our future, where are we going, and some of these things in the developer experience bucket, right? That's what we're doing here. We're cleaning, we're organizing, we're re-implementing, we're documenting. There's efforts to get a bunch of this stuff in, and what we're trying to do is push as much of that stuff in as we can in the 9X series so that we can basically make 10X be a big Band-Aid, right?
Yeah.
Give the developers time to know this is what's being removed, get their modules updated if necessary, right? To remove, to address those kinds of things. And one of the fun ones, right, that we stumbled across just last week, web slices. I don't know anybody that's actually used them, but we have a whole bunch of code that actually interacts with every single page load that supports web slices. Which web slices, for those that don't know what they are, because I even had to refresh my memory, they were a concept introduced and killed with Internet Explorer 8. Never worked in any other browser, only worked in IE8. So, not really used. We're still following our own protocols. We said we're not going to make a breaking change in 9.x anymore, so we're not going to, but we've marked it as this is disappearing so that the developers know, but I will gladly be deleting it in 10. So that's really what we're trying to do, right? Is we give you some new, we fix some old, and we're cleaning up for the future. And I think we've done an amazing job with that with this release.
Well, let's just round things off here, I guess, by just giving a big shout out to all the contributors for this release. Thank you so much for your contributions. It is not underappreciated at all, really. We could use more, and we really appreciate the efforts of those that have contributed to this release. If you've not gotten involved and you are a developer, please be sure to reach out, kind of connect with us out here on GitHub. And, there used to be a day where contributions were not quite, what is the word? Not really nurtured like they are now. So you come out here, support, getting in the conversations of issues. We have a discussions branch out here, or a discussions tab out here on GitHub now. So if it's something that's not quite ready to be an issue, or it's a new feature or something like that, we can talk about it in the discussions area here, or really just submitting a pull request, and know that somebody is looking at this stuff. It's not going to sit there for 3 years and not get reviewed. Now, issues might sit there a while if there's nobody that's contributing to those issues and all that, but just know that you're welcome in our community. Mitch, any parting thoughts from you heading into this incredible release cycle here and pending official release here?
Really, I just have to echo what you said. The more contributors we get, it's always awesome seeing more people, new people, even some of those that have been lurking in the shadows for years, submitting their first pull request. I just approved one tonight from somebody that I know has been using DNN for at least 8 or 10 years, because they've been a client for that long, and they actually submitted a change. Like, it's awesome. So,
is that Josh?
Yeah. I've known him actually, I guess they're a former client, but yeah, it's one of those things where, like, getting some people in that haven't, and that's the thing. We're here. If there are questions, do it in the public channels. My contact information is there. Gentle reminder: don't post anything security related in the issues, discussions, etc. Security at DNN Software, that goes into a bucket that I read.
And that's security at dnnsoftware.com. Okay.
So dnnsoftware.com. Yep, that's currently. Some stuff may change in that regard at some point here, but that's what we're using for right now still. Anything can come in there, whether it be for DNN Platform. Evoke stuff sometimes goes in there too. But, really it's help us test this release, understand that, there may still be some rough edges, but we're working to get there. Getting past this opens us up, even with the same group of people that we have, to do amazing things going forward. But I don't think anybody really understood how far behind we were left by inheriting some of the things that we did. And I can't thank everybody that's contributed for this enough, right? No one person could have achieved what we have with this, and we'll all be better for it.
Absolutely. Yeah, good words. And also, I'll point this out too. Mitch just published a couple of blogs out on the dnncommunity.org site. So if you have a moment, go and check out these two. You'll get a little bit more detail on the insight on the Telerik things that we were touching on here, as well as a wonderful article on open source and your role in that. Really simplifies the perspective a bit there and helps us to know how to contribute more. Check out MitchSellers.com as well. He's got a lot of incredible resources out there on his blog. And Mitch, thanks for all that you do for the DNN community in heading up the technology of DNN Platform.
Yeah, well, thank you as well.
All right. Well, it's great seeing everybody. I hope you have a wonderful night. If you like this channel, please do hit subscribe below and click the little notifications icon, and you'll get notified whenever we go on live streams. If you have ideas for new content that we can do, please post them in the comments below, and I'll be glad to review them and try to incorporate that in a future episode. Take care, and you all rock it out DNN style, okay? Take care, Mitch.
Thanks, you too.